can check out, legally you've checked out, but then you can check back in again. And the other thing is traffic on Main Street is already horrendous. And I think with something like that, it's only going to add to it. I was seeing in the plans about the poor homeowners where that is like butting up close to them, which isn't a good thing either. And then they said something about it's good for Monroe being the, people want to stay, but there is no real huge corporations in Monroe that people would come to stay. I mean, there's a few things on Pepper Street, but most of them are those little warehouses and such. There isn't really any large offices that would require their employees or people who come visit them to stay. So I'm thinking, there's not really any tourism in Monroe, so who is going to use that property is my question I'm asking myself, and I'm asking, you two. I just don't think that Monroe needs an extended stay hotel. I mean, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that were supposed to come, weren't able to come, some more late, so on and so forth. But most of the people I talk to are not for this. They don't think it's going to do anything to benefit us at all. It's actually going to make the town, I just think that Monroe is supposed to be, a little rural type of town, and I just don't think an extended stay hotel is what we need, or is it going to help us at all? So.
Thank you, ma'am. You did fine. All right. Anybody else want to comment on this application? Come on out, sir.
Hi, I'm Rodney Salvis. I'm actually the owner there of 381, 383 Main Street, and I'm also the trustee of 379 Main Street, which is my mother's property in the back. I'm very familiar with this property because it used to be owned by my cousins. Played out there when we were kids, so I know when that road was developed, the one thing I haven't heard anything about is blasting. They had a blast to put that in, because that whole circle there is nothing but rock. There's maybe 8 feet of soil in this before you hit rock. I know my mother's yard, for us to build a pool, we dug down 4 feet and it was ledge. We had to build up 2 feet just to get a 6-foot pool. So I know there's gonna be blasting involved. The other concern is Main Street. Even though there was a lot of construction done through there, it's not wide enough to get around. Every night when I come home and I pull in my driveway, I got cars sitting behind me because if they want to get around me, they're going up over the curb. They can't get around you. And that driveway where they are proposing isn't going to be any wider unless they're going to do any kind of road improvements. I've had cars backed up all the way to the dam behind me at night. Try that 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night when all the traffic's coming through. It doesn't happen. I've sat at my driveway if I want to go north. I've timed it. I've sat there anywhere between 5 to 8 minutes, sitting there waiting for traffic. So adding this, and you're adding a restaurant that's open to the public, that's adding traffic. I'm also in sales and in marketing. I do a lot of traveling around the country. I've stayed at places like this, but they're mostly geared for people that are doing projects in an area. It's, you're planning on something that's maybe a week, a couple weeks. That's what this is geared towards. We really don't have anything like that here. I mean, we have Vitronox. That place is a warehouse, it's marketing, and it's repair. That's what they do. They're not gonna have people coming in with special projects. That's why a lot of this is geared where it is, along the Route 8 corridor, 95, 84, where there's also a lot of corporations, and a lot of this stuff is happening there. You wanna be close to where you are. Salespeople don't really utilize this kind of place because they're in, they're out. I'll travel around the country for 4 or 5 days, and I might hit about 3, 4 different states. Because I go in, I plan the meeting, and I get out. And that's what most salespeople do. I work at Conair, we're over a $2 billion company. In my division alone, we have about 50 salespeople that are covering the country. No one stays like this. They don't want to prepare their own meals. They don't care about a kitchen. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that you have a facility that has full kitchens, 26 rooms with kitchens, plus a restaurant with a kitchen. That's also 26 bathrooms, along with a bathroom in the lobby. So you have 28 bathrooms. That's got to be some epic septic system to handle all that. That's just another one of my concerns. Right now, as it is, when that road was first put in, and people would run up and down it, cars would just go up there, I guess, out of curiosity. The one thing I noticed, the grade of that, unless you're gonna have a full barrier of evergreens up that side next to those first two houses, everything, lights just shine right into my house. That's all I would notice at night. I'd all of a sudden lights going through the bedroom. So the way the grade is and the way that curves, it points right into those houses as far as cars coming down that driveway. Now my mother's house up in back, I know this is supposed to be sunk down in a hole, I guess. Because right now, as it is, there's a lot of that mature growth there, but you can see right through it. There's nothing really blocking it. What's blocking is the scruffy growth that has started growing back up. So unless there's actually all along that side some kind of evergreens being planted, you're gonna see through there. You'll see the top of the roof. If it's, I don't care how low it is. But depending on how low they go is depending on how much blasting they're gonna do. And that's another concern because my mother has a well. Her house still has a well. We don't have city water up there. So that's, they blasted then, they blasted when they did Main Street and did all that construction. So we're always concerned about that. So right now, I guess that's my concerns. Thank you.
All righty. Anybody else want to comment on the application? Anybody? Anybody? Going once? Okay. We are going to be able to take public comment again based upon my understanding of how this process is going on this application. Mr. Soley, so just a couple of things that got brought up, blasting wells. Question, are we following our B1 up against a residential district regulations with regards to landscaping, screening, setback, et cetera?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Anything else you want to add for tonight?
I don't think so. I think we can touch on a lot of these elements at the next time
Okay.
we're before you.
So essentially what we're looking at is you folks are going to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals in January?
Yes.
We are going to see you back here January 15th.
Yes.
I think it's 19.
19th.
19th.
Yes, I believe so.
Ladies and gentlemen who have come out tonight, since it doesn't sound like you've come to many of these things before, the contents of this application are a public record and they are available at the Land Use Department, which is at the far end of Town Hall. If you have questions, concerns, you can speak with staff. My suggestion is call to make an appointment. You know, general information, what are the upcoming meeting dates that affect this application? That can be answered pretty quickly, but if you have specific questions about what are in these documents, you're probably going to want to call ahead. All right? Commissioners, any other last questions for tonight?
No.
So, Mr. Soley, we're going to continue?
Yes, sir.
All right.
When's the CBA? 2 o'clock?
15. Before we get into the next two text amendments, does anybody need to? What's that? All right. We're going to take a 5-minute recess before the next two text amendments, so you're at recess. One.
You get one.
One.
You pee or you swim?
One. Jeremy, make sure you only get one.
19. It's the 19th, yeah.
No, the 19th.
They knew they weren't gonna have it.
That's fine, I just must have.
Just for a definition of a hotel. You're not happy.
Hey, Chris.
Most people would stay there. I think that they would do that, but
Is that okay to record the,
I think so. The problem is that everyone said someone else was gonna do it.
what the, cause he bought,
You brought the plans in,
and then has the oil
your
tank.
guy brought
Sorry, because I don't come that often, I have to say. So this is just a hearing, obviously. So
it. He said the owner was gonna do it.
then they're gonna have
Owner
another
said,
one in January
This
19th.
hearing, they're gonna work with
I
staff
think it's got,
to
it's
try
just
to iron out some of the
The issues
technical
you raised,
issues.
the issues you
The
raised.
city planners and
Right, right.
town
Yeah,
engineer.
January 19th.
January 19th,
oh, you wanna remove.
No, the point was.
do this all over again with the new.
More
plan.
detail, more
Oh,
detail.
The
And so
plan,
then-
some of the issues that.
So then should I come
Yeah,
again?
it's-
or
I-
does
I
it
didn't
not
see the plan, but I
matter?
told
I
the
just voice my
engineer.
opinion now
I mean,
and
he-
that's
And then
something
relocate.
again.
It says-
Is that as far as I'm
For it
gonna
to be removed. No, it says it on.
They're gonna, it's gonna change, and what they're gonna
She's
submit
supposed
on
to have
19.
I mean,
They're here, I
There's
haven't
gonna be
got
a lot
you.
of different components to it.
okay,
It's
if not, then I'll just.
Or a
remove it.
particular,
He's anxious to get going.
issue that they.
He wants to
they
get
vote
started before the
tonight,
weather turns
something
bad.
they changed, that, ooh, I wanna be able to speak to that.
And shops, I think we're all set. We're done with everything.
So far.
462 Main Street.
Until we get more information.
We've got everything recorded.
But then everyone here is trying to finish eventually. Is
Five
that
of
it?
those, 5 of those.
You had one on the one.
Well, there's this thing too.
We can't talk about that, but if you're,
Tonight, I'm
you're
just
interested,
putting
you
an
can come
extension.
back on.
If they want me to,
And
I can say
tell
something.
the.
Well, I'm gonna try it again, you guys, I have a crew coming, with some people coming with me.
Well, the reason is,
So,
because Control Point, which is this
Still having it,
that's
still having
the
it.
You don't live in
dollars
that area.
uses for all of our moving and stuff.
which is
So
up
they had to
farther,
come from
right? Is
Massachusetts,
this
come
near,
out,
is this near where the
resurvey
kids?
property, and Dave said he had to wait until,
Little kids jungle gym.
you know, they came out and did the survey, then he would fix his plans.
Oh, yes.
It's right
yes.
there.
And I had to get them to do one regarding conservation easement.
But thank you for your time.
That's okay.
Yeah, like the no-mow grass and all that stuff.
I had,
Yeah, but
I
that's
had
taken almost a
family.
year.
So it's, you know, Dave said he was gonna hopefully be done mid-December,
Stay at hotel.
because we got it a few
Well, this week.
weeks ago.
And,
Survey.
he ended up staying over 2 months.
I think the neighbor did some
Yeah,
stuff too,
that
or
was
something.
not him, it was Stratford.
I'm sure the guys.
But he moved in and he said he was gonna be here.
Oh, they're
At least a
all,
week,
like,
at least a
jumping
month
into
until
it.
he got resituated.
The real-time people, McDonald's, everybody's like,
Well, no,
They said, oh, no,
Old Jesus
no
Christ.
problem.
He says corporate.
You know, so the time went on, I said, geez, you know, it looks like this new place is gonna be quite.
it's interesting dealing with.
Yeah, because they don't really
Ready and.
tell.
stayed in
Because he
that.
called me up to
They
find
weren't
out.
cooking in it,
It's like,
but it
it's gonna be your restaurant? It's gonna be for.
Any hotel.
I'm doing their building
You
permit
got a bed in
in,
the bathroom, people could
Greenwich,
stay.
because they were like, do you wanna take control of this?
Right, yeah,
Like
yeah.
this would go under here,
You
so
know,
this
put it
But
together.
people do
But
stay
it's
in
tough
hotels.
because I'm like,
They didn't stay in hotels.
I'm coordinating one group down in New Jersey,
When we
another one up in
traveled,
Massachusetts, then the local guy who's gonna build it here. And
Nicer, so.
So when they end up building it,
I don't
they
know,
have
one
their
night.
own crew or do they?
If it's just one night,
You know, and I was saying,
I
why
think
are they paying?
if this is Trez's, if they're affiliated with Trez, which I think they do.
We do that when we go on
They have
vacation.
Paul
Yeah,
has
that's something, the gym is downstairs.
construction manager for
You
their,
know, if we're
for their
traveling,
McDonald's around here.
we
Because he's doing the one in Greenwich too.
Yeah, I mean, it usually makes sense, they have a certain way of doing it.
Yeah, they have like timelines, they have time, like everything's posted to timelines, and then, you know, if they can go on, if they can go do it, then they do it, if not, it just gets knocked out, and they're not gonna start it
Yeah,
until
right.
next year.
And it's more the inside than anything else.
It's
It's like,
21
specifics.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, when, you know, the one we're doing in Greenwich, because they're only doing an interior remodel, but you have to have all the cutouts of all
Oh,
the
right,
new
yeah.
machines
I don't
and
know, race
and all
car
that
front.
stuff, and all like, you know, how they store the meat, hey, how's it going? How they store the meat, how they cook the meat, how they prepare it, all that stuff. So, stack this big of all their, we're talking about McDonald's, all their cutouts
and
and
we went to our hotel, and
so.
when you signed
It's
up,
interesting.
how long is
They're,
it?
it's fast. I met with one of the guys who's the engineer, and they use cameras and they
Well, they're
watch
microwaves,
steps
they're
of
not-
how people. So they count their steps and they try to do what they can to minimize their steps. So if you're the guy who's working the fries, but you're also supposed to be doing the burgers, it's like the stations are here, so you don't have that many steps. When you're that big. company, that's how you,
That makes sense.
seconds count.
I worked in a place I worked in a place and we had a line that literally was a line. We had in the middle of the guy, in the middle of the one side was sortation, and the other side was the main service guy and the salad.
It was a happy morning a couple weeks ago.
No one ever removed one.
Yeah, yeah, you're not supposed to do that, well, because you waste time.
Well, you also knock it each other.
I know you can't control that.
So, well, I mean, that's what, nobody goes in these places anymore, they just go to the drive.
Well, they go to the drive.
It's like Starbucks, I mean, Starbucks now, it's like, now there's stores that just drive. Exactly. That's basically all you use and go in there. Sorry?
If there wasn't
So, hopefully, this thing will get all the plans done. I think they'll have one this is something that very
Oh, really? And now they're going to let's talk to the adults, what you can. Wait a second, you told me to be in the back.
Right before that.
You know what? Kill your damage goods.
It's been a long road with that one, so.
The thing when I thought most things really goes back to just more of the system.
Yeah, sometimes if they don't, if it doesn't work out, they just
And they're saying his choices are now for other people.
All right, we got everybody back. Let's get to work.
Commissioners? What? Okay. That's what you want to go with? Recording, we ready? Yes, Scott?
Yeah, we're good.
Will? Kira? All right, we're back on the record. Town of Monroe Planning and Zoning, December 1st, 2016, 8:24 p.m. Next up, item 6, zoning regulation text amendment. First up, mixed-use landmark property development. Zoning text amendment petition affecting 8.2.3I, mixed-use landmark property development, revising the supplemental standards affecting the use and regulation of a landmark property. Petitioner, Kimball Group LLC. Jeremy, would you like to read the notice?
Notice is hereby given in accordance with CGS Section 8-7D that this application is the subject of a public hearing this evening, Town Hall Council Chamber, 7 Fan Hill Row, Monroe, Connecticut, this Thursday, December 1st, 2016, 7 p.m. or soon thereafter, to hear testimony, public input, and receive correspondence concerning zoning regulation text amendment RAA 2016-05, file number 980E, mixed-use landmark property development. Zoning text amendment petition affecting section 8.2.3I mixed-use landmark property development, revising supplemental standard affecting the use and regulation of a landmark property. Petitioner, Kimball Group LLC. Related materials associated with this matter are on file and available for viewing in the Monroe Planning and Zoning Department office.
Mr. Gresta, exhibits.
Exhibit number 1, proposed zoning text amendments. Exhibit number 2, referral.
That's it?
No, sorry. Scratch those.
Oh, okay. Redo.
Exhibit number 1, regulation amendment petition application by Kimball Group LLC. Exhibit number 2, attachment to regulation amendment by Kimball Group LLC. Exhibit number 3, referral notice to MetroCog, Naugatuck Valley, COG, South Central Regional COG, and Western Connecticut COG. Exhibit number 4, referral notice to abutting towns. Exhibit number 5, response from Weston Cog. Exhibit number 6, fire marshal comments. Exhibit number 7, notice to acquiring water company with certified receipt. Exhibit number 8, notice to Commissioner of Public Health comment. Exhibit number 9, Naugatuck Valley Cog staff referral report. Exhibit number 10, town engineer comments. Exhibit number 11, referral letter from the Newtown Planning and Zoning Commission. Exhibit 12, town planner comments. Exhibit 13, building official comments. And Exhibit 14, application materials in prep of the hearing. That's it.
For the applicant.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley, licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located here at 501 Main Street in Monroe. We're proposing, working with the Kimball Group, we're working to propose to modify the landmark property special exception regulation. This was recently adopted in 2013 as a way to create a mechanism to encourage the rehabilitation and reuse of properties that we kind of deemed and determined would be more landmark properties. Specifically, it applied to, and it has been applied to, the property at 1428 Monroe Turnpike, the former castle that was owned by the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth. What we're proposing to do now is to modify this regulation amendment to make a couple minor tweaks to the age of the building. The current regulation as it currently reads says that in order to be eligible for landmark property, you need to be constructed prior to 1960. What we're doing is we're actually modifying that so it's not tied to a date, but more at minimum 50 years old.
15?
50.
50.
50. We can talk specifically on where, this would apply to the former convent building, which is behind the castle on Monroe Turnpike. So the former convent, we recently constructed a new convent. We've looked at an opportunity to modify these existing regulations so we could apply that same landmark designation to the former convent building and try to repurpose the use of that facility rather than demolish it and tear it down.
When was it constructed?
Huh?
When was it constructed?
65. So it would be 50 years old, over 50 years old, but it wasn't constructed prior to 1960, which was the impetus for some of our revisions. Now, what I'm going to do is, we obviously submitted the proposed regulation language in front of you. We do have comments from the town planner. So what I'm going to propose, or what I'm going to run through is our proposed regulations, which actually we've identified and included some of the comments from Will into the language I'm presenting to the commission tonight. But what we really wanted to do is run through what we're proposing and then go through the rest of Will's comments and get some feedback from the commission on what you feel strongly about that we should or should not incorporate into this language. So we aren't expecting this hearing to be closed this evening. We wanted to get feedback and then we can make any revisions as necessary for your prior to the next hearing. It's in the supplemental standards where the mixed-use landmark property development exists, and it's an additional requirement for special exception permits. It's subsection I from section 8.2.3. So what this shows on the screen is the existing language is shown in plain text. Our proposed language is shown bold and double underlined, and then we've provided bold and double underlined in red, which addresses Will's comments. So if you guys can actually have Will's comments in front of you, we can kind of go through point by point, show how we've adopted his recommended changes, and then discuss the items that we haven't necessarily incorporated to get the commission's feedback. So with that, the purpose of the mixed-use landmark property development, that essentially stays the same, except we've changed the language from insure to ensure, for one. Number two, a property may be developed as a mixed-use landmark property if said development property is at least 5 acres in size, with a building that has a minimum of 5,000 square feet of gross floor area. This addressed one of the most comments. Located within 1,500 feet of Route 25 or Route 111, as measured from the existing structure to the street line. The property or the building thereon is determined by the commission to be suitable for mixed-use development which at least 50% of the building was constructed 50 years prior to the date of a mixed-use landmark property special exception permit application. And is constructed to a size and of materials that together render it architecturally unique in the town of Monroe. We had gone through this at length when we initially adopted this regulation. There are very few properties that actually meet the requirements of this mixed-use landmark property designation. And again, the revisions that we're making really are looking to incorporate the former convent building up on the top of that hill. And that, again, that was more than 50% of the building was constructed prior to, or more than 50 years ago. It is within 1,500 feet of Route 25 and Route 111, and we provided some of those other measures that Will had commented on. Going to Will's comments, so he had 4 bullets underneath item A2. A1, we've addressed, we've added gross floor area into the language. Bullet 2, the measurement from the existing structure to the street line, we've added that language in. A general comment, the commission should determine if a set date or moving date as proposed is desired. We feel that a moving date as we've proposed is appropriate because, you know, in 10 years, there may be a building that's 50 years old, which could qualify this as this. And again, the commission has the full protection of the special exception permit process, and you get to determine whether or not something could be considered a landmark property. So we feel a rolling date is more appropriate. And then the last bullet was, in addition to the above, the age requirement should be revised to require a percentage, 50%, 75%, or other modifying in part. The former language said was constructed all or in part 50 years prior. I think based on, and we haven't had a chance to discuss this, but based on our interpretation, we think that we wanted to make sure that the majority of the building, or more than half, has been constructed 50 years prior. So in this instance, that building up at the top of the hill, it was built in 1965, but there were wings added on as time passed. We'd still meet the requirement if only 50% of the building had to be constructed 50 years ago.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
So if it said, so you're talking about, if I remember correctly, Monroe L falls within this as well, right? So you're talking about a building that's like 1930?
Yes.
The castle was also?
Correct.
50s?
39.
39. And then you get into the nunnery, which you're saying is 65, but your cutoff date is 60?
Currently, the cutoff date is
He's
60.
proposing 50 years.
Right, 50 years old instead of tying it to something that was built prior to 1960, we're trying to say something that's 50 years old, at a minimum.
50, minimum 50%.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. Next point, number 3, the following uses may be permitted within any structure existing on the property, as said structure may be modified under subsection 4 below. We had subsection C, it was just the typographical error, so we made that revision before. 3A, office use including professional and financial offices, but not banks. The commission should determine if the proposed changes would also apply to this permitted use or not. If not, the above use would need to be modified to limit same, i.e. for existing buildings with a gross floor area of less than 15,000 square feet. We're basically, we wanted to hear the commission's feedback, but we think the language is written is fine because we feel it's fine. We didn't think we needed to add an additional restriction for building areas or any of that. So we wanted to gauge comments from the commission.
You understand my comment is that you could take the old convent building and turn it into an office building. And that's really what I'm asking them to think about.
Well, I think there are a number of, well, one, that particular campus, if somebody did want to make an office there, I don't know.
I'm not making a judgment. I'm telling them so they can make a judgment.
Right. And that's what we want to hear the commission's judgment on that.
Well, shouldn't office use in this setting be accessory?
That's what I was saying.
No, we allowed it to be a use that could be permitted within the structure.
It
No,
could
no,
be an office.
Yes.
don't misunderstand me when I say accessory. So my house can have an accessory apartment, it can have an accessory at-home business.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, you have a structure, and shouldn't any business use be accessory within that structure? So if you're talking about having mixed use of the property, whether it's residences, and then you want to have some business there, shouldn't the business be accessory? Isn't the primary outlook of this to be, residential in nature? or
Well,
no?
yeah, yes, that's the
Well,
ultimate.
that's what their intended desire is with a convent building. But the way the law would read, it could be like the castle. Someone could propose it as the castle, partly apartments, partly office, or it could be all office.
Right, so I guess what I'm asking, and go ahead.
Yeah, it's John Kimball for the record. Will's right, the whole convent, the whole old convent could be used for office or a bank or a
Not a
hedge
bank.
fund.
Not a bank, but
Not a. I guess,
a financial office.
hedge fund, something like that. But this also, the regulation, and again, we're looking for the commission's feedback on this. We're not rigidly going in one direction or another, but, we're also looking at this is something that could be used for Monroe L, and so making Monroe L an office might be the next highest and best use for Monroe L, unless you rezone it to Business 1 or some other zone. So, we're not just applying.
Monroe's already permitted though.
No, if the school moved out and you wanted to repurpose the use, you could
Oh.
theoretically apply under a landmark property and use it as an office.
They would
I'm just
probably be
saying-
much better
I
off
see.
going to a B1 or
I know,
Certainly.
but
Absolutely.
all we're saying is, we're
Right.
not tied to this, we're not married to it. Will wants to put a.
No, I'm not saying I want to
Well,
put
he's
it, I
asking
want
you
you
to
to
consider.
He's asking
understand.
us to
He's asking you
consider.
to
So-
That would be the
consider.
result
Right.
if
Which
you don't.
which gets me to the question, are you proposing, are you asking us to consider 100% commercial use, or are you asking us,
The way the regulation would read, it would be 100%, it could be 100% office.
Then where's the
In a
mixed
residential
use?
zone.
This is a mixed-use landmark property.
Yeah, well, the
And it
way,
was-
Should this be a landmark property development?
How it was written was, it could be used for a combination of both. And if you recall, the initial concept was, if we wanted to use office space in the castle and have apartments above, we crafted a regulation that could allow for that. If the commission feels, I don't think we feel, the applicant isn't looking to allow for commercial development in a residential zone. So if the commission feels strongly about putting restrictions in place, we'd certainly support that.
No, I'm asking just for clarification, because it's a mixed-use zone. But if we're
It's not
going
a
to allow
zone, it's not a
100%.
zone.
It's an
Well,
overlay.
mixed use,
It's a use, it's not a zone.
Correct.
It's
But-
not an
but
overlay
we have-
zone.
That's
we have
correct.
mixed use in the title, and if the regulations then are going to allow 100% commercial, there's no mixed use
That's the existing
element.
reg. The existing reg does not require it to be a multiple uses. It can be an office or a financial office, or it can be multifamily, or a combination of those two.
Correct. Or any permitted use in the underlying zone.
all right, so, and I'll sit down again.
Uh,
But to-
Not with this.
To Mr. Porter's comment,
Well, yeah.
maybe we want to strike mixed use and just have it called landmark property developments, because you can do only residential, you can do only commercial, it doesn't have to be mixed use, so you're correct in that. And that might be a change that the commission wants to make, is just take mixed use out of the title.
But getting back to something that the chairman said, when we approved the renovation, the protection and renovation of the castle, I believe most of us were under the impression it was a residential use with accessory offices.
No, that's not correct. That is not correct at all.
That's not correct?
No, not at all. It is a separate office, just happens to be the office of the same person that also has the residence. But the way this code is written, the principal use is an office and a residence, and it could be multiple residences. And that's what the code allowed. It allowed that mix. It could have been all office. That's what the code would allow.
And I think that the concept, as John pointed out, if somebody wanted to make that castle a hedge fund and make the entire place office, we thought that could be a pretty cool use for that building, if that was a desire.
While still preserving it.
Right.
And I'm sort of raising this issue because we're kind of scaling up in the size of the thing.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, the castle isn't small, but it's not as big as the convent.
Correct.
And the other buildings that potentially could fall into this aren't, you know, they're more the convent, the castle or smaller. So
Correct.
So you have to understand, now we've scaled up with what it can be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to decide that's what you want or not want.
So what I propose is, as we go through some of these points that we're not necessarily, you know, incorporating Will's language, I'd really like to hear the commission's feedback on this particular element before we move to the next one, if that pleases the commission.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I would prefer to see the thought process being a mix of uses. I don't have the properties in front of me like we had the first go-around where we were discussing this.
I recall, I could tell you, unfortunately, I don't have them in front of me either, but there was the 754 Main Street, the old church, at the time was residential and farming. That site's since been changed to industrial, so that no longer could apply for landmark property.
Okay.
There was Monroe Elementary. There was the food pantry. And there were a few residential homes on Route 111 that were kind of up back in the woods that were over 5 acres and were built prior to 1950. And they were simply old residential homes. There wasn't anything else unique to it. And that's correct. Oh, that's right. So those houses don't apply anymore. So it would really be this property, Monroe L, and the food pantry.
Food pantry's on 5 acres?
Oh, it's not 5,000 square feet? The food pantry's out.
What's so unique about the food thing?
It was built before 1950.
Oh, but it has to be.
And it was
unique
over 5
architecture,
acres.
too. It has to be unique architecture, too.
Exactly.
He was just commenting, for me personally, I think I'd like to see some kind of ratio where residence is predominant. That's just me.
So that's more of a wholesale change of requiring a mixed use versus allowing any individual or a combination of.
Well, considering where we were when we passed the regulation and where we are right now, and thinking about the locations that are available, if the town should, at some point in the future, not want to be in Monroe L, then that'll probably be a straight zone change. So you're into a residential area.
Okay.
So some number.
Then would the commission be good with Will's 15,000 square foot number? I mean, is that a number that you're comfortable with, or would you want to give us, if you can give us a number, we'll work with that number.
You want a number or a percentage?
Well, I think, so the concept of making the castle a hedge fund,
Sure.
that castle is overall, including the basement, is about 10,000 square feet. I don't think having a small hedge fund office in that building would necessarily have an adverse impact to the surrounding residential community, especially because I live next door.
So a number works better, like 10,000 square feet or 15,000 square feet would be better, because then that whole building could go to a hedge fund theoretically.
And not require that it have a mixed-use component.
Right. So something in the 10 to 15,000 feet would work for us if it would work for the board. So we could just basically say it will have no more than a mixed-use component and or no more than, or if it's solely office or whatever, it'll be no more than 10,000 square feet,
Or for existing buildings with a gross floor area of less than 15,000 square feet.
Right. So, I mean, Will's
Are you thinking of a mixed use for the larger?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd want that.
not thinking about it, I'm just, really, we're just trying to,
Well, if the castle is 10,000,
but actually it'll be 15 by the time we put the addition on, so that's probably where we'll come up with the number. So let's use 15.
the castle's 50, but no, even though your addition is under 50 years old, it actually counts
For the gross.
For the gross. So what am I reading here? The commission should determine, that's talking about the square footage of the building?
Right.
So if a building is less than 15,000 square feet,
It could be an office or financial.
it could be 100% office.
Right, and it's, what it's, my initial thought, or not thought, recognition was, okay, we're changing these regulations, we're adding some density for the residential component, we're moving into potentially the old convent building, which is a substantial building. These changes are positive for doing that, but they also, if you don't change anything about item A there, opens the door for
For
the
an office.
convent to be an office building in 100%. And I didn't know if that's really, when you had initially talked about this in the general appointment, really where you were interested in going. You were more interested in doing the apartments and trying to achieve that,
Yeah.
and not make this huge thing an office building. So-
I think the idea the original idea was a mixed use, so it should be containing a residential
That's fine.
portion. So regardless of how big the building is, that's kind of where I'm back at.
But you never adopted this code to require mixed use.
I understand that.
No, we didn't, but
We can
it doesn't
now.
mean it
Well,
wasn't
no,
what we
I
were
know.
thinking, you know?
We can now.
So that's 2 steps back.
As you've pointed out, we've gone from the castle to the
Yeah.
castle and the convent. The convent is 90,000 square feet. You could essentially be turning that into an office building
Yeah.
under this regulation.
Exactly, you know, we're taking what maybe was interpreted as a mixed-use landmark property and basically changing it into a business zone. Not a zone, but a
Yeah, I
business
understand.
use. Where the intent was, we would allow business with a residential component.
And
Well-
again, you can change that now, but your original adoption.
Yes,
Did not do
but
that.
the original adoption only reached to the castle, it didn't reach to the.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand.
So what if it was just this, what if it was like a straight 25%? So if there's a mixed use, the office use, including professional and financial offices, but not banks, would be a maximum of 25%.
I don't know how that would apply for the existing castle, as the
33%.
basement is.
Well, you're 6, right? 6,000, I think, is your basement.
No, we're 3.
Oh, it's only 3?
We're a third of the building, you know.
Oh,
We're
600.
more than a third of the building, because the second floor
It
is
is
smaller.
600.
Yeah,
Well,
so
we
we're
allow,
basically,
we allow half,
yeah, 40%.
That's-
50%.
But that's 45,000 square feet of common.
As a practical matter, we're not getting 45,000
Yeah.
feet of office in the con.
No, but if
anything.
you have, let's say you have a two-story building and you want to have commercial use on the first floor and residential on the second floor, I mean, it'd be 50/50.
Well, you know, the other thing too is that if you think of status quo, that's where the 15 more or less would get you. It keeps the castle at where it is and lets it have the office
Either
it
one works
has,
for us.
and it doesn't let it be in the convent.
Yeah, either one works for us, 15.
So if we say
square feet.
15,000 square feet, it could be up to 100% of the castle and up to 15%
No,
of, 20,
it would be none of the convent.
huh?
It would be none of the convent.
Okay, what'd I miss?
If you go with the way I suggested it, what I'm saying is you can only have the office use if the building is
It's less than
15,000 or less.
15,000.
And,
So that knocks the castle, that lets the castle in and stay, but it knocks out the convent.
and you guys would be okay with that?
We're okay with that.
And why don't we use the number of 20,000, because the convent is 90, and if somebody puts an addition on their house and they overshoot it by 6 feet,
Yeah.
20,000?
The applicant's fine with that, please the commission.
Does that work for you?
Say that one more time.
So Will's proposal is that
So,
that
so item
the
A,
ability to have commercial requires a GFA under 15,000 square feet. So the castle can have commercial, but the convent cannot, because the convent is 94,000.
so
And the 15,000
That's
would
what the
keep
applicant
the
said.
castle sound.
And I actually said, make it 20,000 in case if someone does their addition and they overshoot it a little.
So,
Well,
so
who's gonna
three
build
A,
over 20,000 square feet?
Right now, the castle is what?
That 15 is, I think, more than enough to capture the castle.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I heard
How
that,
big, how big is Monroe Well?
80,000.
It is that much?
If somebody does something to Monroe Well, they're gonna rezone it. They're not gonna use this. This has too many hoops.
And if it's a more intensive use, the SAP process would help us deal with parking and
Yes.
the rest of that.
Yes.
Not
Yeah,
necessarily-
this is an SEP, so.
Correct.
But if I understand correctly, then what you're proposing would preclude office use in the condo.
Correct.
As a principal use, yeah.
Is it principal use or?
As
Yeah, I
any-
mean, the
as
guy
any
who
use.
lives in the apartment can have his little office in the
Right.
corner. I mean, that-
And
Which
the
is-
applicant's
which-
okay with that?
And the building can have its office, I mean, that's, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
Right, but Will, that's outside the scope of A.
Correct.
All right.
Those
so
would be
A would be
expensive.
revised to read office use, including professional and financial offices, but not banks, for existing buildings with a gross floor area of less than 20,000 square feet or 15,000 square feet.
And you guys figure that out,
Yeah.
because if you're gonna do,
15,000 square feet.
okay.
I have a minor question. Why not banks? Other than the fact that you don't want drive-throughs, I just,
You
you know,
just
it's hard
said
to
it.
know the difference
Banks
between a
define-
financial institution these days and a bank.
Yeah, I think the bank and the services that go along with banking, ATM machines, going in, making deposits, stuff like that, the traffic associated with it is different than if it was
More
a financial office,
No.
financial institution.
I also think they followed some language that was in the
No,
LO.
I
Correct.
know it was, and we have it in other places, but it's just, because it's harder and harder to know the difference between
Right.
what they are. It just, that's the economy we have.
Well, and perhaps what you should do is follow the definition. So just change the line to follow the definition, because we have definition that is office, and then it's, you know what I'm saying? I just looked at it, and consider that while you guys are cleaning this up.
Sure.
Because what you did was you followed the LO regulations pre.
Right, we gotta follow the office, we just want offices, we don't need the financial aspect, there's no reason.
You don't need
Right,
to
I don't
call
think
it
we
out.
can
You
delineate
could,
it.
you can use the definition in the code and just mirror the definition in the code.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, we can look at
That
that.
might even be cleaner.
Okay.
So we good on A, folks?
Yeah.
B,
B, multifamily dwelling units, i.e. more than one dwelling unit per property, but with a maximum development density of not more than 3 bedrooms per acre. The current regs say 1.5 bedrooms per acre. We're proposing to increase that to 3 bedrooms per acre. Will has 2 bullet points here. The first, and this is another item we want feedback from the commission. The first, the amendment would double the bedroom density. This may be appropriate for the preservation of the former convent building, but is not recommended for smaller buildings such as the abutting castle, designated landmark property. Instead, it is recommended that tiered density standards be established in recognition of a larger sized building such as the former convent. Bullet 2, additional clarity should be provided regarding the ability or not to add density through a permitted building addition. See related comments below subsection 4A. So with the density being tied to acreage, we didn't think that was much of an issue, especially when you look at some of the other, specifically the ARR zone, which the commission just approved, which had a considerably higher density of 5 units per acre for attached dwellings, or 2 units per acre for detached dwellings. And there's also rooms associated with that in that same language. So it was 15 bedrooms per acre for attached units.
but are you proposing age restriction on your bedrooms?
We are not, but we're
So
not,
don't
but we're
compare
also, well, but we're not talking about, but hang on. It should be pointed out here though, because units and bedrooms are very different things. Because under the ARR, you can do 2 units per acre, and each unit could have 5 bedrooms in it. So you could do 10 bedrooms an acre. We're only proposing 3 bedrooms an acre. So we didn't necessarily think that going from 1.5 to 3 was that big of a leap. And we also didn't necessarily see that there was a need to provide a graduated standard.
When you say multifamily, you're talking about attached or detached?
Most likely attached.
Because
apartments.
it doesn't, I mean, it just says multifamily.
Well, it's in the building.
Well, it says
One
multifamily
building.
dwelling
Oh,
units,
that's true, oh, that's
Yeah.
true, well, that's right, if it applied to somewhere else, right, okay. I keep forgetting.
So this regulation would apply to the convent
yes,
and the castle.
yes.
The castle is currently on how many acres?
I want to say 8,
And it has to have a minimum of 5.
yes.
Now, the convent is part of a large,
It's on 124 acres.
and it's got to have a minimum of 5, but would the intent be to carve that off?
Yes. The intent would be to reduce the size of the parcel that this property sits on.
To,
John Kimball again for the record. We're looking at about 25 acres, but the key thing is
so you're looking to put 75 bedrooms in the convent?
potentially. But the key thing is the whole driver on this is septic capacity, and including even my property. I couldn't put 24 bedrooms in my house right now. I don't think I want to put 24 bedrooms in my house, but and the other thing is, we're only allowed to expand either building up to 50% of the gross floor area. So if I added the 5,000 feet to get to 15,000 feet, in that I'd have to fit those bedrooms. So
How many bedrooms did the sisters have in the convent?
120.
Yeah.
120 bedrooms.
So essentially, you're looking at 75 instead of 120.
And a reduction was there.
And wasn't your last proposal 32 or something like that?
It was 22 units and 32 bedrooms, but we're working with the DEP on the septic system at this point. So that's where the lines get drawn in the town is, you can do 32 bedrooms and stay in the state, and then state health code, and then you go beyond that, and you're dealing with the Department of
I'm sure
Environmental.
learn to stay away from them.
I would love to stay.
And just to make a clarity point, I don't think it makes that much difference, but in the AR, they are limited to either maximum of 2 bedrooms if they're attached, and 3 bedrooms if they're detached.
Yeah, which gives them 15 unit density.
That's okay, I was getting away from the whole ARR thing.
Well, I just
because
wanted to know the record.
Look, ARR, regardless of how many bedrooms, is designed to try and retract folks who have moved away from and getting into the downsizing. So to me, it's a completely different thing.
But if you think of it in terms of just a 2-acre lot having 6 bedrooms, it's not a reach. We have plenty of 5 and 6, 4, 5, and 6 bedroom houses in town. I don't think it's an unreasonable density.
Any concerns on the 3 bedrooms? Will, any?
Cool. All right, so that's those two. C, combination of any of the uses permitted by right and those listed in subsections 1 and 2 above. Will had suggested some language, expand the insertion of the following at the end of the sentence, as otherwise permitted, restricted therein. We can add it, I didn't necessarily see the need to it, other than adding more legalese to the language.
Subsection 1 and 2.
I mean, we see it as unnecessary, but if you feel strongly, it doesn't affect anything, I don't believe.
Is it subsection 1 and 2, or is it subsection
It's actually subsection A and B,
3A and 3B?
yeah.
Okay.
So that should be revised.
So combination of any of the permitted,
Which would be the office or the multifamily.
well, I mean, some kind of language along the lines of what Will is suggesting is appropriate when you review it, that it's, what you're saying is, you're saying 3A is office use, 3B is residential use, and 3C is a combination of the two.
Correct.
So I don't see it as a big deal to come up with a language that says a combination of A and B is allowed.
No, he's talking about this.
No, I'm talking about Will's suggested addition. I don't necessarily see it as
Right,
doing
but-
anything, but
but-
if you want it, we can put it in.
your 3C has to get changed, correct? Your
Just because
3C
it has to be A and B, yes.
Okay.
We just caught that.
And then should we add Will's comment? As
He's saying
otherwise
no
permitted,
and-
restricted.
I don't
Yeah,
necessarily
no.
see the,
Don't we have those words elsewhere in the regulations when we,
I wouldn't have suggested if I didn't think it was useful for our purposes.
yeah, just
We'll add
add
it.
it
That's fine.
or discuss, but add something similar there. Okay.
Well, if it already is fine, okay, you said okay, add it.
we'll add it, we can, we just didn't necessarily see the
Okay,
need for it.
Next,
Um,
D.
So going down to, well, D stays the same, 4 general provisions. Item
What
A-
is the purpose of D?
I think that's, I think that's just one of those catch-alls that we put in.
The regulations are very clear. If it's not permitted, if it's not specifically permitted, it's prohibited.
I think at the time, we just wanted to reinforce that.
Clear.
Okay, keep going.
4 general provisions, item A. Existing structure may be modified to add garages or other structural additions, provided that the additions do not cumulatively exceed 50% of the gross floor area of the structure existing on the property at the time of special exception permit approval. All applications to modify a structure shall be referred to the Architectural Review Board for review and recommendation back to the commission. We didn't see the need to change that. Will's comment, the above existing provision should be clarified as to the uses permitted within the allowed added structural additions. Are these limited to structural improvements to the foundation, walls, and roof, or is this intended to allow a building addition generating new usable floor area, noting that the latter could result in a significant land use change for a property such as the former?
Pointing out that as we're expanding the mixed-use landmark property regulation, now going a little bit further off the street, we've added a 94,000 square foot building to the inventory that can add 50% to it.
But it doesn't matter because the number of units is restricted based on the acreage. And it's also further restricted based on septic capacity.
So what other types of structural additions might be under consideration? I think maybe that's-
Either a garage,
No, the garage is
yeah,
there. It
a
says
garage, or it would just be if a certain portion of the building needed to be expanded slightly to allow for a layout of an apartment or something of that nature.
Well, hypothetically, the comment could be doubled.
50%. It'd be increased by 50%. It couldn't be doubled.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, theoretically, it could be increased
I
by
agree with Bill.
50%.
I mean, if the intent of the regulation is to be able to add those accessories to a building, garages,
patio.
That's really where I was coming from. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if it was intended to be just the accessory component, or was it to be accessory plus?
The con-
What if it's like a deck or a patio
Those are
or
Great.
accessory components.
let me
what if
put
it's
it to,
enclosed?
let me put it to you this way, Mr. Solly.
Again, it's the use of that.
Mr. Solly, my concern would be taking a 94,000 square foot building and then adding the same 50% to it. I'm fine with a regulation that gives you a parking garage, covered or otherwise, decks, all these accessory things that we see. My concern is, all the other septic things aside, that we would take 94,000 square feet, three stories, is it? Two? Three?
Right. 2, 3.
Yeah, and then just add another wing for more residential. That's my concern. And if you guys can figure out a way to add what you want to add,
Why, if they want to increase the building by 30%, and this regulation states that so long as 50% of the building is more than 50 years old, it falls under these regulations. Why would you not want to allow them to increase the size of the building?
Given that they get all the septics and everything else is.
There's going to be all kinds of other things that are going to determine what can and can't be done.
No, I realize that there's a number of other things. Again, we went from A, which was the castle, to B, now the castle and the convent. And my concern would be putting another wing on the convent.
Right, but then
The purpose of your, underlying purpose of this reg from the beginning was to preserve the older
I
building?
understand, but the
And
way
to allow
that, the
some-
way that this is written, so long as 50% of that building is more than, in this case, more than 50 years old,
Yeah,
it can apply for the mixed-use landmark property designation.
right,
So if they add 20,000 feet to the convent, they're still well below that threshold. More than 50% of the building is 50 years old.
well, in a scenario, you could have, if you take, let's just say it's 100,000. 100,000 square foot building, right? And let's say 50% of that meets the age requirement, 50% doesn't. You could add another half of that building, so now
Now you don't have-
2/3 of the building is less than 50 years old and only 1/3.
So then it doesn't qualify.
No, it does qualify, absolutely does.
Sure it does.
The qualifier is that 50% of the building has to be a certain age.
Right, but if you add, so like Will said, 50%,
I know where you're going.
50,000 feet is more than 50 years old, 50,000 feet is not,
You're eligible.
you're eligible. You put another 10,000 feet on that building, you're not eligible. Because now you got 60.
You only have to be eligible at the time of application, not when you're done.
I hear what you're saying.
Right, but if they're applying,
Well, I'm just-
and part of that application is a 10,000 square foot addition.
That's not what the code said. The code says at the time of application, only 50% of your building has to be 50 years or older. I
Well,
mean,
the time of approval.
no, it's at the time of
All
application.
right, so change it to time of approval.
Well, that's
how
sort of
about-
the same thing that I'm talking
How
about.
how about we find a way to write it
At
up
the
so
time
that
of special
the
exception
things you're
approval.
looking
Hold on a
for.
second. Oh, sorry.
Where does it say?
No, I'm just
So,
good.
I was just gonna say,
Ms.
Tom,
Kimball.
right, so, looking at the real world case,
Oh,
which
you're
is
right.
my existing house,
Right.
where I have just,
That takes care of it, right?
a
Yeah.
garage with a pool house and a room above and some storage space, so if we couch it too much, then that eliminates the ability to do what we just did. And part of the other thing is, part of the financial, not that I'm looking to expand the building, but part of the, sometimes to preserve a landmark, you may have to, add 5 more units in order to amortize the cost of the new elevator over 55 units instead of 48 units in order to make the thing financially feasible. And really what we're trying to do is make this thing financially feasible. It's on then I said that, it's tough to renovate a building to start with, so it's a tough road. But I don't think that, I think that Kevin was right in his first statement, which is the limiting factor is the density per acres and the septic capacity, and if we, say we expand the site to 40 acres, which is a big piece, that's just gonna mean that more of the rest of the land won't be cut up into a subdivision or some other thing, so it'll consolidate the development into one spot, and, but the reality is, we wouldn't get us, based on what we know about the soils on that site, we're not gonna get a septic system for 120 bedrooms on that site. It's just, it's almost an impossibility based on what we're dealing with in terms of soil. So if we couched it somehow, it's not a huge problem, but I don't want to restrict it so much that we can't do anything,
Sure. What are some of the triggers on septic systems? Because as it stands right now, if I heard correctly, you're looking for the convent to hold 75 bedrooms?
Roughly, right.
When does the wonderful state of Connecticut start getting involved in the septic?
32,
So you've already passed that threshold.
past that.
Is there another threshold?
No.
Okay.
It's just that the biggest thing is you have to have, it's the way the state of Connecticut looks at septics, it's a linear, you have to have a linear system, and it has to be able to,
Sure.
travel 21 days before hitting anything like a wetland or a sensitive area. So it's a very rigorous control of where we can't do what we can in the state system, where you just stack systems on a piece of land. You basically have to
Right.
have 1,000 feet to put this system in, you know, so we're really, you know, if we could add, you know, we could add potentially, you know, a couple of units, but I don't see us doing any wholesale additions.
So you're at 25 units, which is 75 bedrooms, give or take.
Well, more one-bedroom units, so we're actually, I think, 39 units at 75 bedrooms.
Okay.
Just we're trying to,
And what I just heard you say is, if there were going to be units added to the convent, you're talking a number under a dozen.
yeah, probably, yeah.
So 39, 18, 19 is 50%, you're a little lower. Again, my only concern is, what are we adding to the building? And maybe there's just some wordsmithing to do to that section that segregates livable floor area, or, I don't know.
Well, so, but again, that also,
Maybe it doesn't, maybe,
the addition that was just approved for the landmark property has livable floor area in it.
correct, but maybe you have things like decks, garages, et cetera.
Or no more than 50% of the additions can be used for
Other
living space
than-
or something like that, you know what I mean? We can probably work with.
You're coming to us for language, and I'm
Yeah,
just,
no, no, no.
again,
No, we're looking for feedback. We
Yeah.
want to understand if you feel strongly about putting some sort of protection in place, saying that we can't add on to that building and use it for residential use.
the protection I'm looking for is that 94,000 square feet of living space doesn't increase by 50%. All of these other things that may go into a building, whether they're community areas, or decks, or garages, or things like that, my concern is.
So it sounds, so if I may, it sounds like your particular concern is more, you don't want a 94,000 square feet building to turn into a 140,000 square foot building of all residential use.
And then,
But-
add all the other
Right.
decks
but-
and,
And especially because I think part of this too is, we have a 94,000 square foot building. I think the current intent is that there's actually portions of that has to come down. So we may actually be removing some of the existing floor area, but then making additions in other areas. So the overall net floor area is, that would be utilized for residential use is probably gonna be considerably less.
That's real true, and I don't discount that, but the regulation can't count it.
Oh, no, I understand
That's the
that. I
problem.
understand that. I'm just trying to get to a point where we can.
what's the regulation going to look at in terms of addition and subtraction?
Well, if they take it away, that's part of the thing, is that the idea is to save what you can, but the plan is that to make it work and save it, there may be things that have to come away, and that's sort of
Well,
the quid
let's-
pro, but
let's
it's not
do-
gonna take away, it's not gonna take away density, because the density is based on acreage.
Let's do this for tonight. Am I the only one who is concerned about the building going from 94 to 130? Okay, so why don't you three, since we're leaving this open, work something out that finds a middle ground between your ability to modify. I mean, I think we're looking at it saying, you've got 94,090 to work with, whatever the number is.
Right.
How do we give you something that allows you to do some of the things you're talking about, that'll preserve, large chunks of this, still be able to modernize some of it and go from there?
Right.
I'd like to just make another comment.
Sure.
My personal opinion is I'm not so sure that this particular building deserves quote-unquote landmark status, architecturally and historically significant impact, it's just, but the castle, yes, but this one I'm not so sure about. And I'm just wondering if you have given up the idea completely of tearing it down.
Well, let's leave that for another day.
Okay,
until-
I'll
Yeah,
just raise
no, no.
that.
So, no, yeah,
Yes,
that's-
it's coming down.
Answer it.
Yeah.
So,
You don't need to answer it.
thanks.
Scratch this, tear it down.
Now, Commissioner Lindstrom just wanted to put something out there. She put it out there. You've got something to think about.
And I appreciate that.
And you'll have to
You
make
put a
the,
target.
you'll have to make the point when you get to this.
The question is, to
So why don't we keep going, because it sounds like there's an agreement from the commission to have some kind of language in this A, which gives you ability to do certain things, but not necessarily go and,
While double the density.
thank you. That's all.
I'm just curious, are either on the federal historic,
No,
so you don't have to deal with any of that?
no, they're not on
All
National
right.
Registry.
Bullet B, let's
Bullet
keep
B.
going.
For any, well, again, this is actually one with some red in it. For any structure located within 500 feet of Route 25 or 111, measured from the existing structure to the street line. So we actually incorporated Will's bullet from his first comment there. His first bullet. The second bullet, the above should be expanded to indicate a minimum setback standard for permitted additions to buildings located more than 500 feet from the street. We actually thought that was addressed in 4D, which talks about any additions to the structure, you know, and it has other setbacks from the other property lines. I guess,
That's
I
not
think,
the front property.
so I guess that's what Will's point is, I think he's trying to include minimum setback standards for building additions located more than 500 feet from the street. We didn't necessarily see this as that important, you know, again, we're talking about just the convent here, and if anything,
Well,
you know.
this isn't just the convent, this is also affects the castle, so in a sense you.
It doesn't, the castle is within 500 feet of Route 25.
Will, are you trying to say that there should be a setback from the street?
For the other uses.
Well, no, if they add on.
For any structure within 5
I don't
feet.
have to use it. Add on.
For any structure within 5 feet.
So the castle isn't allowed to add anything in front of it, and the existing street setback is being maintained because it's within 500 feet.
No additions, of any new structure, right.
Will, you comfortable?
Um,
If not, you got 2 weeks to think about it.
yeah, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Moving on, C, again, the current language, any addition to or modification of an existing structure or any new structure on the property shall be compatible with and complement the existing structure with regard to design, scale, and the materials used. Will's comment, in concert with the proposed amendment below to subsection G, the above provision should be expanded to include reference to the following. In addition to design, scale, and materials used, general appearance, architectural style and character, fenestration, finish, etc. We didn't necessarily feel there was a need to further embellish the parameters that we've established in regard to design, scale, and materials used because, again, we don't necessarily want to match exactly the architectural style, character, fenestration, and finish because that considerably limits what you can do from an architectural standpoint on the facility. And if you look at the castle, the addition that went on the castle was complementary to and consistent with the design, but it wasn't a stone castle addition.
And that's not what I'm suggesting either. The things I'm adding is adding to the list of design, scale, and materials. It's still based on being compatible and complementary. Because you don't want to add on something that's totally different,
Because
that isn't
they're-
complementary. Doesn't have to look exactly the same. I'm not looking for that, because you don't do that with older buildings. So that's not the purpose. The purpose is to beef up the part about being compatible and complementary.
We didn't necessarily see the need to add all the additional embellishments, but
Okay, so commissioners, where are you on this one?
I think it's appropriate.
Either way.
Do you like the architectural style of that building?
of the existing convent,
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Could be improved on?
I think it could be improved with more complementary things that are, you know, that are compatible and complement the design, scale, and materials used. I don't know if we necessarily want to additionally incorporate architectural style, general appearance, character, fenestration, finish. You know, I think
I mean, the design kind of covers it all in general.
Yeah, exactly. The design, scale, and materials used, we feel is enough of a catch-all to capture the intent without adding all the additional language that could or could not be interpreted different ways.
I would agree with that, too.
I think it's a good idea.
All right, keep going.
As long as we have Paul in the commission, I'm okay.
D,
D, any addition to an existing structure or any new structure and any site improvement to the property shall have a minimum setback of 30 feet from all other property lines. To address Will's condition, we actually added side and rear property lines, which I think captures what Will was looking for, because the term other is unclear. So we would recommend to change it to all side and rear property lines, and then the front setback is addressed in item B.
Will, does that work for you?
Yeah, that's what
Okay, keep going.
And
Um,
30 feet's a good number, not 50?
30s.
30's a good number.
Yeah.
Okay.
E, any new structure on the property will be treated as an accessory structure. We've incorporated Will's suggestion to say any new separate parens detached building or structure on the property will be treated as an accessory structure.
Commission, you good with E?
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay, the last ones are all still discussion points, unfortunately. I, on-premise parking shall be provided in accordance with the provisions of Article 6 of these regulations. Will's suggestion, the above provision should be expanded to include standards which require, ensure, and landscaped associated off-street parking facilities. We feel that's already captured in Article 6 in regards to parking lot design, landscaping, et cetera. We didn't think we needed to add further restrictive or further, further regulations into this specific section, because, then you're left with, it kind of just gets away from you. Then every special exception provision, you're then redesigning and contradictory to other sections. We think Article 6, as it exists, is sufficient enough to address that
Yeah, the
concern.
difference here, though, is that you're talking about, again, two components. Something that's in a residential district, which there may be other non-residential, like churches, but it also is somewhat of a building that's supposed to have some unique character. So the parking expansion that you're probably gonna need for turning it into apartments is more than what's out there, obviously. And that wants to be done in a very sensitive way, which, when you go to a commercial district, which what those parking landscaping standards mostly are related to, it's not, the sensitivity isn't the same. It still wants to have landscaping well-designed, yes, but the layout, the location, the hiding of it is a little different from, you don't do that. You're not doing that on an interior perspective for retail development. You're more concerned about the perimeter. Here, you're concerned about the perimeter, but also fitting into the fabric of the residential neighborhood. So it's not really that big of a restriction. It's really just trying to give the design
But
intent.
I think that,
They're hidden.
when we went through the big regulation revision a couple of years ago, we tried to pull all these little things, these little design standards out of the general text and put them all into Article 6. So if we do want to address this, I don't think it should be addressed here. I think it should be addressed with the parking standards.
Well, but my suggestion is coming from the perspective specifically to this use, to make this use compatible. That's what the special permit standards are about. So this is, to me, a specific issue for this use. I mean, we could add it in the other section as, instead, but, I still think there should be
Well, no,
something more
that's my only
specifically
comment.
said.
If you felt something needed to be added, I don't think it
Yeah.
should be added here.
That's fine, we could add it in the other section. And we could look at the other section, see if it does what you said versus maybe something that
Well,
could help.
could I ask, could you offer like an example of what you were thinking?
Do you really
Well,
need a loading zone?
Huh?
Do you need a loading zone?
No, but you can request a waiver for a loading zone, which we would
It's still
do.
a requirement.
No, but yes, but,
And you can't get a waiver, you can show it on the plan.
Correct.
But you don't have to build it. That's
Excuse
not a
me.
waiver.
no,
You just asked it's some, I'm kind of like,
no, but I
I'm
kind of,
saying that there are things in 6 you may not want.
Well, for instance, one.
6 still applies.
Yeah, I know.
6 applies
Hold on, hold on.
regardless.
There's nothing in 6, I don't think anymore, that kind of limits how many spaces would be in a grove of parking. And maybe in a retail, that's not a big deal, or as big of a deal, but I think it would be here. I wouldn't want to see one big sea of parking, one big parking area for a comment.
Well, and I think,
It would be better to be,
I'm going to
In
suggest that you look at it, and
residential.
not because not because we're trying to add other things to it. Run through it and see if there are things that might not make sense that are requirements or non-waivable. Like I said, loading zone, do you need a loading zone? Do some of these, do you have a parking standard in here that makes sense for what you're doing? Are we over parking or under parking? I'm just saying, take a look at it, you got a couple of weeks.
and maybe there is stuff in 6 that's adequate, but we can take a look at that.
I think what Kevin was saying is, we're bound by 6, whether we like it or not. We're not changing 6. So we may not like 6, but we're bound by it, and the standards related to parking regulations.
But 6 might not achieve the things that I'm talking
Well,
about.
and that's why I asked specifically if Will had any examples, because I understand, and I think, yes, you don't want one big paved area that's all the parking space for the entire apartments. But from a marketability standpoint, there would never be a design intent to do that, because if you have an apartment on the other side of the building, you're not gonna park
we
all
wanna
the way
ensure
over
that.
there.
We
So
want-
yeah, but, I mean,
But the problem is, it's tough to write it in, I know what you want, and we intend on delivering on what you want, but it's hard to write it into regulation to capture what you want, so I don't know if you can.
Yes and no, but yeah.
I don't know, and I think that's what Kevin's saying, is if there's something specific that we can add, we're not.
We can look at
averse.
that. I have
We're not
probably a
enforcing-
list of 6
I'm-
things that came
Yeah,
out.
we're
I'm
not
going-
enforcing
Section
work one.
6.
Well,
I'm going
let's
through
look
it-
at the last 4.
I'm going
Yeah.
through it right now, and 6 might just be fine. However, take a look at
My
it.
only point was, anything that's going to be addressed
Put it in
regarding that, put it in 6, don't put it here.
But, my thing is, like on the last 4, I think we're pretty much down to just sitting down with Will on the last 4, because they're really more things where he'd like a standard, and I don't think the commission, I don't think we're against what his intent is in any of these, it's just that we don't know how to incorporate it.
and we believe that a lot of these other points are already covered under the design standards for the SEP
But I
application.
think we can sit down in a meeting with Will, and we don't have to waste.
And I would agree with that statement. The last 3 bullet points that you have, and the last 4 bullet points, review them. Like I said, I'm not saying that 6 can't cover it, and I hear what you're saying about how do you design what you're trying to design, but, maybe there's a better way to design it. Take a look. You got a couple of weeks, right?
Yep.
All right. Anything else on this tonight, folks? Anybody from the commission? Anybody from the public want to comment on this application? I see a head shaking no. The rest of them are on your side. Okay, Mr. Solly, any closing remarks for tonight?
We look forward to working with staff on some of those other items and being back before you in a couple weeks.
What are we, December 15th? Yes? We're continued to December 15th. Thanks, everybody. Okay, last public hearing for the night. RAA 2016-06, file 981E, signs, freestanding signs, letter size, and wall sign size. Jeremy, can you read the notice? Do you have it still?
No.
Here.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with CGS 8-7D that this application is the subject of a public hearing this evening, Town Hall Council Chambers, 7 Fan Hill Road, Monroe, Connecticut, December 1st, 2016, 7 p.m. or soon thereafter to hear testimony, public input, and receive correspondence concerning this application, RAA 2016-06, file number 981E, signs, freestanding signs, letter size, and wall sign size. Planning and Zoning Commission proposed text amendment affecting section 6.3. Signs regarding standards for minimum letter size of text and symbols on freestanding signs, maximum sizes of wall signs. This entire file, complete details, copies are available in the Monroe Planning and Zoning Department office.
Thank you, Jeremy. Will, exhibits?
Exhibit 1, proposed zoning regulation text amendments. Exhibit 2, referral notice to the different metro cogs. Exhibit number 3, referral notice to abutting towns. Exhibit number 4, response from Western cog. Exhibit 5, referral notice to Connecticut Commissioner of Public Health and Aquarium Water Company. Exhibit number 6, Naugatuck Valley cog referral response. Exhibit number 7, fire marshal comments. Exhibit number 8, referral letter from the Newtown Planning and Zoning Commission. Exhibit 9, building official comment, and Exhibit 10, town engineer.
All right, this is a submission of the commission. Will's going to run through it for us. I'll do amendment number 1. How's that, Will? Make your day? Amendment number 1, we're going from 10 inches minimum letter height to 4 inches.
Okay. All right, well, as you said, this is a proposed amendments by the commission. This was some amendments that were worked in the regulations subcommittee, went to the full commission, went back to the subcommittee, and was put to tonight's hearing. For the record, referrals have been made, as noted in the exhibits, to the regional planning agencies as well as to abutting towns. The referral notices that we got responses from were all either they concurred or had no comment in that regard. The amendments, there are four amendments specifically. Do you want to just go through them one by one, or do you want to
Go ahead, run.
brief each one? The first amendment is to change the minimum character or letter height size for freestanding signs from 10 inches to 4 inches. The second amendment is amending the regulations regarding non-residential district wall signs to create a tiered approach based on the linear footage of the tenant space. And it's broken up for those storefronts or office fronts that are up to 60 linear feet would have a maximum size wall sign of 18 square feet. If you were between 60 linear feet and 150 linear feet, that would grow to 32 square feet. And then if you were above 150, you would get 1 square foot per linear foot of frontage, and that would be 40%. Your sign could be no more than 40% of that ratio. The third amendment is changing the title relative to signs in residential and farming districts, and that's really just cleaning up some language for more purposes of clarity than anything else. The fourth amendment is reflecting the wall sign size in the table that we also have. And we're taking out some of the previous components that didn't make sense and probably didn't belong in the code. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right. Commissioners, this is your application, so are there any questions?
Well, I guess we're gonna have another public hearing at 12:15 for solely engineering.
There's an upcoming on other elements of the sign regulations,
Right,
Not this,
not this.
something different.
so it's not gonna change any of this that we know.
No.
Well, there's a separate petition to do other things, and there's a couple things in here that it relates, that they're relating to, but that's a separate petition, and you can deal with it then if you like. I mean, that's really what that petition is for.
Right, so then, why should we vote this in now? when
Because this
we-
is a
Well,
separate application.
No, I got all that. But we're gonna maybe change this again? If we don't know.
haven't seen the application.
Oh, okay.
That's up to the
Well, I mean,
commission.
I
I
was-
mean, this is a
No,
legislative
No, that's what
action.
I'm saying, I don't know if we, I mean, as me being, I don't know,
So Leon, these are the changes that we went through.
Right.
And we decided we were close enough to go to a public hearing.
right.
So whatever.
I was just saying, because I saw that on there.
I saw it too, but I don't know what it
And I'm
is, so.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I mean, because if something's gonna change in here, or if there's something different, then we'll have to go through this whole thing again, right?
You're gonna have to go through this whole thing again anyways, because it's a text amendment. So what you have in front of you, any questions?
No.
Okay. Will, why don't you step aside so we can open the floor to anybody who wants to talk to us? Come on, Mr. Kimball.
John Kimball, I live at 1428 Monroe Turnpike here in Monroe. Sorry about that. So we've been fumbling around with the signage regulations for a little bit here. One of the things that I'm not certain of is I know people are unhappy about signs, the sandwich signs and the banner signs, and the guys that go up and down and flip around, the air-driven signs, and the shockwave signs that are out there, and the blinking and strobe light signs. I haven't heard anybody in my time, and I'm not here as long as some of you, but, 19 years here in the community, I haven't heard an outcry of people saying, man, that facade sign is way too big, or way too small, or it doesn't work for me. I haven't heard one comment from anybody in the public against our facade sign. So we had a regulation that was 10% of the facade square footage area that you could put a sign up in. That regulation would have allowed signs many times bigger than the signs that we have currently in the community. We have signs on a lot of buildings in town, and I'm not seeing that the facades, I think, let me say, you're going in the right direction, because right now 2 square feet for 6 lineal feet gives us 33% for a sign. But having, so going at 40%, it's moving in the right direction, but it's not consistent with what retail users need. And that's the purpose of these signs, is to give the retail users what they want and give them the signage that they're going to need to come to the community. Our signs, we allowed, I think what we're missing here is signage is a little bit self-regulating. You're not going to, if you get the right to put 1,000 square foot sign up, and you don't need 1,000 square foot sign, you're not putting 1,000 square foot sign up. And that's actually proven itself in the town of Monroe with our current signage. The stuff that's out there, historically, they had the ability to build twice what they did, and they built half what they're allowed, because they built what was appropriate for the buildings that we have in town. Now, what we're taking is something, where we were permitting, the signage regulation we had was not a great regulation. It said 10% of the facade. Well, what's defined as the facade? Is it the glass from the ground up to the top of the roof? What's the facade? What's the 10% of? It was very hard to calculate. It was very cumbersome to deal with. So, I think we've clarified it. I think we're moving in the right direction, but I totally disagree with the number that we've chosen. Again, the tiers that we've got. Now, I understand the concept of tiers, but the way you've graduated it, it's going to basically require or push people to go to something that's 62 feet to get to the next tier, or it's not really driven. It may be easier. It may be easier to. You accomplish tiers the same way by basically just using the last thing that you've got there, that C sentence, and saying you can have 1 square foot per lineal foot. That gives you a graduated sign scale that if you have a 40-foot wide store, you get a 40 square foot sign. If you have an 80-foot wide store, you get an 80-foot wide sign. The signs scale with the size of the space. If we use the program the way we've got it designed here, the signs don't scale with the size of the space. You get a basically your 60-foot tenant gets the same space as a tenant that's almost 3 times that size. So you get like an example, like a Michael's Crafts, Their sign would be that of a 60, not that of a tenant that's taken 150 feet and 25,000 square feet, So you're on the right direction, but it doesn't have to be. It can be it can be simpler. You can get rid of A and B. You can leave C and just come up with a square foot per linear foot and make it uniform and across the board, and it works. You can put a maximum on it to say we don't want any more than X, because no matter who comes in, we don't want the sign to be more than whatever, 500 square feet or whatever the number is, you know. You could, you know, I wouldn't put a minimum on because somebody might want a sign that's, and that's the problem again with your minimum on the letter size, you know. Somebody may not need a 4-inch letter, and by putting a minimum on, we're requiring them to put a 4-inch letter, you know. You know, and I don't know if the freestanding sign language goes into, I don't know if a traffic sign or, you know, directional signs and those are considered freestanding signs, because there's a number of DOT-related signs that don't have 4-inch letters, and so you can't comply theoretically with the traffic authority and comply with zoning in the same regulation. I know what you're driving at, but I think you're putting a bunch of regulations out there into something that didn't need as much definition or regulation. And I think that's primarily where I'm coming from. And the biggest thing is knowing different shopping centers and things around here and other communities. The current regulations as proposed are not going to give us what we see out there as being ideal signage situations. So that, I know Kevin's done a lot more actual tangible research, and he'll be able to give you specific examples of things that really we feel look great, and correlate those to a size, because that's, we haven't gotten there yet, and you know, I know you've been working on this hard, and I appreciate the effort, and it's an improvement over what we had. It's making it easier to define, but I think we can simplify it and make it even easier, and then it'll be easier for everybody, Joe, and then we also won't have people trying to, you know, add 2 more feet of frontage to get to the next sign level, you know. But you know, I think, you know, that's probably the simpler aspect of it. But thank you very much for the work.
So Mr. Kimball, before you go, because we're the applicant, this is kind of reversed. Just a couple of responses for you. I think we heard from everybody that the 10 inches was too big.
Right.
The 4 inches we chose as a readability number, which we did go over a lot. The existing wall sign regulation actually did need to be changed, because there's one part of it that there was some contradictory language. So yes, there was no hue and outcry, but there was from the commission, because when we read our own regulation, measured as a straight parallel horizontal line across the front facade of a building, or a cumulative total of 60 square feet, whichever is least, no single sign shall exceed 32 square feet. So no building could have more than 60 square feet. So we did see that was an error we needed to fix. Just so how we... No, and I'm hearing what you're saying.
I'm not saying the regulation doesn't need to be fixed.
Yep.
We definitely think it needs to be fixed. That's what
So
Kevin put in.
So we're getting it into a position where we've got the A, B, and C, and I hear what you're saying. Although it sounded to me like you said A and C would have the same size sign, A being 60 linear feet and under gets 18 square feet. C is actually 150 linear feet is going to be 60 square feet, unless they did that wrong.
I'm not saying it's going to have a different. What I'm saying is, you know, you get a storefront. Your storefront's 20. You know, a lot of storefronts they start at like 20 feet. You know, so you're going to start at a 20-foot sign.
They're about 24s.
You know, but they can be smaller. They can be bigger. But so if you have a 25-foot storefront, you can have a 25-square-foot sign. You have a 27-foot storefront, you get a 27-foot sign. You have a 30-foot storefront, you get a 30-square-foot sign. That basically just, what it does is it scales the sign to the mass of the store. You know, it just keeps the sign building to the size of the tenant that you're putting into that space. And that doesn't, you know, this basically, you drop off a cliff, you then have to make it to the next level and then drop off, then, you know, you're not really scaling it in a fair and equitable manner until you get to C. The people that really get beat up are the people that are in B, you know, You go from a 60 linear foot store to a 150-foot store. So you're talking a tenant that might be 10,000 square feet or 7,000 square feet to a tenant that's 25,000 square feet. You all get the same size sign. Think about that. Chico's gets the same size sign as, you know, whatever, Marshall's. It's not the same size store. They don't get there's not any center that you go to around in this universe where those two stores have the same size.
Some people will find the store.
They'll find it. I'm not, the
Well,
stores are
purpose,
there.
you know, we're talking about wall signs here.
Yeah, this is on the building.
Yeah, and so, you know, you're in the shopping plaza when you're at these signs are not necessarily designed to be seen from the road. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I mean, the purpose.
Yeah. You know what,
They're on the building.
you can find anything, you work hard enough at it, you know, I mean,
Cool, where are the applicants?
you know, and I know, and it's not supposed to be necessarily be back and forth, I just making a comment. Let me,
Yeah,
but, you know, just to finish up, I went to Southbury to Jose Banks, and I had a GPS and a phone telling me how to get there. I get to Southbury Shopping Center, beautiful shopping center, brick,
Just get it today.
gorgeous.
It's really nice.
The signs are this big. I had to basically drive around, not even the outer, I couldn't drive around the outer edge of the parking lot and see who anybody was in that plaza. I had to drive right up in front of the buildings, and I was like, oh, there's Chit. Now, I am getting old. And
So wait a second, you're telling me that you went to a shopping center that had small signs, and Joseph A. Banks was in the shopping center?
It was, and they will do it. Look, people will, I'm not saying it's never
Did you find the store you
done.
were going to?
I'm not saying it's never done. I did after traveling all around the freaking center and trying to find where I'm going.
Just to get you to know what
All
other
right,
stores are there.
let's stop.
I know,
Okay.
all I'm trying to say is uniformly, look, you go to Simsbury, you get a sign this big, you know, you go to Westport, your real estate sign can be this big.
We're given signs this big.
It's an intent to be, you know, whatever.
We understand it.
Yeah.
This isn't something where we just pick numbers out of here. We spent a lot of time going over this. We did give it a lot of thought, we gave it a lot of discussion. You know, you could ask 20 people, you get 20 different opinions.
We could ask 20 retailers, that's the thing.
I happen to like your idea of 1 square foot per. I happen, my personal opinion is I like that. But what I've said many times to this commission is you can't legislate good taste. People pick bad signs. Buildings have gables and a
Absolutely.
15-foot sign doesn't fit. You know, there are so many constraints that make a
Yes.
shopping center look really good or really bad. And, you know, we're trying our best.
So why don't we hear from Mr. Solly?
Thank you very much for your efforts.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Let's hear from Mr. Solly, and then, you know, we'll discuss.
Hi, good evening. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm actually a certified design, development, and construction professional as administered by the International Council of Shopping Centers. In my career, I've helped design, develop, and construct over probably 3.5 million square feet of shopping center space. So I would consider myself an expert on retail. I've worked for national retailers ranging from, you know, a couple thousand square foot Starbucks to 60,000 square foot Lowe's Home Improvement store. So I have a very good experience and handle on what retailers look, what they need, and what they direct their consultants and landlords to do and to provide in terms of signage. So I think the proposed regulation, and we have an application pending before the commission, you'll hear us next Friday, the 15th. We were recommending the same exact thing in terms of the 4-inch minimum letter size. We think that's a great addition and we strongly support it. But our thing has to do with the wall signs. What we're proposing is 1 square foot per lineal foot of building of tenant frontage. And in my opinion, that's actually considerably lower than industry standard. But what it does is, in my opinion, it proposes something that's reasonable based on the size of the store and what you're actually looking at. When we're designing a new shopping center, the standard depth for inline retail space is 70 feet. That's the optimal space to develop a shopping center, to create the depth where you can actually break out the spaces and have good usable space for tenants. That can be as small as 15 feet of frontage for 1,000 square foot space, nail salon, you know, something small. You could do it, or you could do it that small. And those stores can range from 1,000 square feet to 4,500 square feet. And one example is if you have a 60 linear foot building, or 60 linear foot tenant, and 70 feet deep, that's about 4,200 square feet. To provide some context about what that would mean from a retailer standpoint is, let's think about some of the larger tenants that in the retail industry we call junior anchors, junior boxes. Those could be a Michael's Craft Store, an AC Moore, a Marshall's, a Best Buy. Those are stores that'll range from, you know, 20 to 35,000 square feet, and the frontages for those stores, prototypically, a Marshall's, for example, is a 25,000 square foot store. It has 132 feet of frontage. That's their prototype, and these retailers want to move into space based on prototypical layouts. They try to fit in, you know, if someone's designing a new center, they say, okay, this is our building footprint, make it work, and that's what we have to do. So contextually, if we have, say, a building that's 70 feet deep and then it steps to deeper to accommodate a Marshall's or an AC Moore, both of those square footages, you could have a 4,200 square foot tenant and you could have 60 or 32 square feet, and then you can have a 25,000 square foot tenant that would still only have 32 square feet. And in my opinion, from a reasonableness standpoint, it's not reasonable to apply this type of graduated scale at this level because it isn't appropriate when you look at how shopping centers can be developed and how they can actually be constructed and tenanted. So, you know, one of the things that I wanted to look at was, again, what we're proposing is 1 square foot per lineal foot of building, and again, I believe that to be reasonable, and it's not outlandish when you look at some of the other retailers out there. So what I wanted to do is kind of understand, okay, what stores do we have in town? What does their signage look like? And is it obnoxious and obtrusive and that's just awful? You know, because I also live here. I'm a resident in town. So look at Stop and Shop. So the Stop and Shop sign is 264 square feet and it's about 300 feet long. Based on the current regs, they'd only be allowed 60 square feet. So the Stop and Shop itself is 264. They have all those other small signs across the front, and they have the Stop and Shop basket with fruit, just the logo, to the right. So all in all, there are about 409 square feet of space. Under this reg, they could do 60. And now, my biggest concern isn't that, you know, their sign is too big. My concern is just from a aesthetic standpoint, if you were to take that palette for that building of 300 feet across, and you were to take that 260 square foot Stop and Shop sign and make it 60 square feet, that would look really silly, in my opinion. And so that was one example of Stop and Shop. Another example is Big Y. Big Y they have 2 Big Y world-class market signs on the building, one on each end. And they're both about 106 square feet. So the total linear footage of the building is, it's like 300 feet or so. So they'd be allowed, under the current, obviously in the regs that they got approved, they were able to put the sign up. It's about 212 square feet of sign. Under the new regs, they wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't even be able to do one of their signs because the 40% per linear foot is so restrictive for that size store that it doesn't work. And again, in my opinion, it's not only, I don't think, and I'm not a proponent of, giving retailers free rein to do whatever they want because sometimes they can get a little outlandish. I do believe that market factors regulate them and self-regulate because just because I have the ability to put up a 500 square foot sign, I don't want to pay to build a 500 square foot sign if I don't need a 500 square foot sign.
Can you walk with me through what that sign would be? What would Big Y get under the proposed C? So they're over 150. They're at 300. They would get 40% of 300.
They get 120 square feet, so they could do one of those signs.
They can do 2.
No, they couldn't because
Yes, they
that
could.
sign is 106 square
They
feet.
can, well, no, they can do, they get 100 and, what do they get total?
120.
They could do 260s.
Or 40, 80,
Yes,
They-
but
And what do they have there now?
106.
So they could do 260s instead of 206. I'm just,
Right.
I'm not arguing with you, Kevin, I'm just doing the math, so.
Oh, and I'm actually, listen, I didn't only show you the Stop and Shop. I wanted to show you the Big Y because the Big Y is a lot closer to what you're proposing. I still think it needs to be a little bit more. That's why we're proposing 1 square foot per linear foot. And again, I think the Stop and Shop's a great example because if you, I don't believe that looking at that building, it's a monstrosity and it's
I
ugly
think
and
it's
it's,
appropriate.
I agree.
It also has multiple signs underneath it which are not even.
No, he's got that all in the mix.
Yeah, and I apologize, we
And
talked about the
Stop and
areas
Shop up in Newtown has a sign probably a fourth of that, and a bigger store. Well,
Okay.
not a bigger store, but same size store. And the sign is probably as big as their logo.
Will, let him, just,
So there were those two, and then I wanted to point to another center, which I think you may or may not be familiar with it. Milford Marketplace on Route 1 is, in my opinion, it's a very high-end center. It's anchored by Whole Foods, it has a lot of great tenants in it, and I think it's architecturally a really good center. They got nice landscaped islands, a lot of landscaping, they got planters. So this is just some material from them. So they got Plan B, they got great tenants, Jose Bank, Banana Republic, and these pictures kind of go across the front facade, and then these kind of turn the corner and go towards Whole Foods. And when you look at some of these tenant spaces, this shopping center, which we believe is something that I think Monroe would love to emulate, and we're actually working on a project that we would emulate this almost to a T. But when you look at some of the square footages of these signs, so Jose Bank is about a 72 square foot sign. It's 43 feet of tenant frontage. So under the current regs, they would be allowed to have an 18 square foot sign, when on this architectural palette, they're almost 4 times that. And in my opinion, that takes away from what you can do from a design
What
standpoint.
do they have in Southbury?
I don't know, but I think it's more than 18 square feet.
so Joseph A. Bank is 43 across the front?
Yes.
So you're telling me is it Milford or Orange?
This is Milford.
They almost look like they have 2 to 1.
I believe they do, and actually, on average, what we did is we looked at this, it's about 1.7 square feet per linear foot of building.
Okay.
Now, we're not even proposing close to that. We're proposing a little bit more than half of that with 1 square foot per linear foot, just because we believe that we want to propose something that's reasonable and not outlandish, but appropriate for how these centers get designed and developed. So the Justice Just for Girls, again, 78 square feet sign, 46 linear feet across, again, considerably larger than 1 square foot per linear foot, but much larger than the 18 square foot that's currently built into the regs that you guys are currently looking at. And then, the Whole Foods Market, that's a 108 square foot sign on the side. It's, they also have signage on the front of their building internal to the center as well. And one of the things that we've looked at and we've talked to about with this commission, as we recently got a zone change for 10 and 36 Main Street, is what we want to do at that center. And this is based on a design that we've talked to. They're not specific tenants but a Mitchell's and a Warhol's and a Patio Shack or a Patio Snack. But you can read between the lines. This could be a Marshall's, this could be a Michael's, this could be a DSW shoe store. Good high-end tenants that could come to the community and make it a nice, vibrant place. And you could model it the same way off of Milford Marketplace. But the problem is, we can't create something like this if Marshall's has the same size sign as Chico's next to it. If a 25,000 square foot building with 133 to 30 feet of frontage is limited to 32 square feet of sign, which the same tenant next door that's only 4,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet has the same signage. And when you look at some of these tenants like Michael's, the Michael's logo, the branding, it's that big swooping M, and when you actually try to apply our signage definition of a box around the entire sign area and you put that on there, that's going to be so small and be so, in my opinion, ridiculous on the palette in which the architecture provides. It would be, I just think it'd be inappropriate. And
one of the things that we have, the situation which we have in Monroe, as you know, is we've got these very linear shopping centers, and there's no architectural distinction.
You're right.
You get a building that has a plain palette that goes from this end to that end, and unlike these where there's a break, a natural break for a sign, and it tells you what size sign to put up.
No,
When you have an
those
expanse of a
buildings-
building that goes on and on.
Those
that's
buildings are
tough.
designed for the sign. They're not built for any other, the reason
That's
why
what I'm
they're.
saying.
No, the reason they have such high edifices is to accommodate those signs. That's all they're for. Big boxes do the exact same thing. If you ever look at Home Depot, they have this parapet. That parapet is solely to put the word Home Depot on it.
And so that's what I'm saying, so what we have is we sort of have one
And again,
long
you have to
thing.
decide if you want to be something different than the post road.
Well, my opinion, I think that's fine. Going with what you're saying, the situation is when you have that linear architecture, it's very plain, and my big concern is when you have, 5 or 6 stores, and you have all different sizes, and all different colors, and all different, that's what bothers me. If you have something simple like that, then you need to be consistent, regardless of how long. If you have a 20-foot tenant, and a 60-foot tenant, and a 40-foot tenant, in my opinion, those signs should be all the same height. If that building is all the same height, and all the same architecture,
And that is.
so it's
that's
more
sort
about
of-
the architecture and about the height of the building than
That's-
the length of the tenant.
That sort of thing is, the uniformity is covered elsewhere in the rec. All right, so Mr. Sully, keep going.
I like to think that I've demonstrated some of my opinions on the matter, and again, speaking as someone who's designed and developed and helped construct a considerable amount of retail, I do consider myself an expert on retail shopping center development and what retailers look for in signs. So, again, I'm gonna be before you in 2 weeks. I'm proposing 1 square foot per linear foot. I know this regulation amendment is before you, and I wanted to make sure that you at least heard what you're gonna hear in a couple weeks, because I feel strongly about it, and I'd hate to have, overlapping, approvals and things like that, if you guys put forethought into it, hopefully you've heard what I said. I hope you agree with me. If you don't, it is what it is. You can't regulate taste. But I think when you're looking at the size of a building and the palette in which you're creating that facade to severely restrict signage to the nth degree that is currently being proposed, I think is inappropriate, and I don't believe it's the character of, and again, I've only lived here a couple years, but I do believe that we want to create nice places and placemaking and senses of place and things like that. And I think you struggle with that a little bit when you get as restrictive as you do.
I just have a quick question for you. As a design professional for these types of centers, have you had experience with national retailers not going into towns such as Mr. Kimball mentioned that have restrictive sign ordinances? And that retailer says, oh, no, we're not going to go there because we can't have the big sign we want.
Every time that I've worked with a retailer where their prototypical sign exceeded the sign area that was allowed, we've been instructed to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and request a variance for a larger sign.
Okay, and if they were not granted that variance, would they then say, we're not going?
I have not had an experience where signage was restricted that considerably versus what the prototypes are. And again, I've probably done 13 Lowe's home improvement stores in my career, right? The Lowe's letters, they're huge. The Lowe's that goes on that building, it's a very large sign. It's similar to kind of what we recently approved with Walmart on Victoria Drive. When you look at the overall facade and the frontage, and you look at how it fits within that facade, in my opinion, it fits the palette. It's a feature of the building, and it's not, having a really small sign looks ridiculous.
Right, but when you go into a town like Southbury or Simsbury or Avon, where they only allow a sign this big.
We permitted a Lowe's in Canton, and we got a prototypical sign for them approved there. They didn't build it because it was 2008 and it was when the market crashed, but we did get a sign approved in Canton, Connecticut, with a prototypical Lowe's sign that was considerably larger than the 60 square feet they would be allowed.
But how'd you get it?
We went through design review and we got a variance.
Yeah, you got a variance, so there's no necessarily accountability percent with that variance, because there probably is no reason for that, so you got a variance.
Okay, but again, the regulation that you've adopted has eliminated that option. You're
missing my point. The Planning and Zoning Commission, which adopted the regulations, said X. The Zoning Board of Appeals, which is a separate entity altogether, said Y. P&Z did not have a say in the Y.
Okay.
What Mr. Agresta is saying is that other towns' zoning regulations are not allowing such a big sign. It's the zoning board of appeals that's granting them, not the zoning regulations.
There are a lot of zoning regulations which, well,
There are a
you're
lot of
correct.
zoning regulations that allow huge signs. There's a wonderful zoning regulation apparently that has a Starbucks sign just off of Route 84 that is blocking the view of the people who are living behind the Starbucks. It's really neat, but that doesn't mean everybody's.
Well, no, but I'd also like to point out, those communities that have really lax sign regulations, it's not like you go there and you see these giant monstrosity signs either.
Yep. Again, okay, anything else?
See
You
in a
make a
couple weeks.
presentation, we close the public hearing, we deliberate.
Any other questions for me?
No, I thank you, Mr. Silly. You've given us some good intel. Anybody else on this? Commissioners, anything else to get on the record?
No.
Ready to close the public hearing?
Yes.
That one's closed. Okay. We left open landmark properties, we left open. Okay. Next up, item 7, nothing. Item 8, Will, did you need to go?
No, no.
You okay? Okay. All right. Item 8, extensions. First up is 13-12-SEP, file 1532A, 10 Victoria Drive. Request for a 90-day extension. Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to grant a 90-day extension for 13-12-SCP, file number 1532A, 10 Victoria Drive.
Second?
Got a motion, got a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll. Commissioner Ambrosi?
Yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Hare, yes.
Hayden, yes.
Townsend, yes.
Next up, 13-1-SCP, file 1518A, 13-2-ZCA, file number 993D, 579 Main Street. Request for a 90-day extension.
So moved.
Second?
We got a motion, we got a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, starting with Ambrosi.
Porter, yes.
O'Hare, yes.
Hayden, yes.
Townsend, yes.
Now said Mr. Russo.
So both were five.
What's that?
5-0.
5-0. Item 9, bond release or reduction, none. Item 10, meeting minutes is tabled. Item 11, 2017 meeting schedule. Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the meeting schedule for 2017 as presented, list dated December 1st, 2016.
Second?
Got a motion, got a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Start with Commissioner Ambrosi.
Porter, yes.
O'Hare, yes.
Hayden, yes.
Townsend, yes.
That carries. All right, item 12, application deliberation determination. Really, the only one you're able to do is the text amendment for the zoning regulations on signs. So Ambrosi, Porter, O'Hara, Hayden, and Townsend. Where do you want to go with this one tonight, gentlemen?
And don't we have to get the approval letter or denial letter first before we go any further?
Well, you're in deliberation to see if you want to, what direction you want to go. Do you want to change anything? If you,
Well, I'm sort of on the fence with this now, so, I mean, I like to table it till the next meeting, until we get into this other stuff. 'Cause I can understand, like, now, I can see that, I think, like, designing the buildings, what we're gonna put up here, and that means if somebody's looking at it, they're gonna design the buildings to be smaller or smaller front or whatever. So you're not gonna get like a bigger storefront, like, better architectural design or whatever to accommodate that sign. So I have an issue with that, if you get to that point, that it may be, maybe we do have them too small, we should do it by square footage, and we can, that's the way I look at it. I mean, because I've been to the store that he was talking about, and you go in there and you can't find anything there, so. But the thing is that, and that's because of sign regulations that they have, and I did talk to a sign guy besides what they're saying, and the guy the guy that does that for a living, and he did tell me that the smaller the sign, the more problems that there could be with actions from people looking for the store. Like they're constantly looking around, so they're not, you know, they don't see like Joseph Banks and they know where to go. They start looking through the parking lot and they're looking while they're driving. I'm saying that, you know, it's got its ups and downs what we have here. And, you know, I never compared it to the Stop and Shop sign like he compared it to the Stop and Shop sign. The Stop and Shop sign don't look bad. It really doesn't.
Do you need to find Stop and Shop?
I could find Stop and Shop down there, but I'm just saying you with it. I understand that. What I'm saying is that, well, he's saying the sign would be a lot smaller than that if we went by these regulations. But I'm saying that, yeah, you could find a Stop and Shop. Well, Stop and Shop is the biggest store in the place, but if it wasn't the biggest store in the place and had small signs, I'm just saying that it's like if we restrict it so much that the people have to design the building to accommodate for that sign. Because you can't have like these big long pillars down here and then put this little small sign in the middle. It's just not gonna look right. So if they had pillars and had a bigger sign, it would fit the front of the building. Not that we're gonna have that here a lot, but I'm just saying that that's, and I can understand everybody else's point about when we have the strip malls and everything's just across the building is just all the same. Because we don't, you know.
Well, what's important, the size of the sign or the architecture?
I think the architect's more important.
So,
And
when
I
you look
think
at,
that
when you
the
look at some
sign
of those
should-
buildings, you look at some of
the
those
sign-
buildings, I know, but you look at some of those buildings and half the building is the storefront, the other half is this edifice, which has a sign.
I understand,
Scale,
but I'm saying,
scale.
but I'm saying it makes it look better than being just square across the front. You understand what I'm saying?
No,
Like,
think
you
of
can
all the
design-
architecture and take away the signage. What do you have? You have nice architecture, right?
Right. But at least you can fit the signage into the area that you want to put it into. I'm just saying, it's got, its, you know.
Signage
I
becomes
can
predominant.
understand about the strip malls, I got all that, because if you have this mall that's just, like if it was just that blue wall across there and all those were signs, then that's okay. But then if you broke it up and you put something like in the middle there, and then you put a bigger sign in the middle, and you had all these little signs going off, it really, it makes it look better, I think. That's my opinion, I mean, that's where I'm at with it. I don't know about you guys, but.
You know, we spent
I know, we spent a lot of
hours and
time
hours
on it.
discussing this and talking about this, first in the subcommittee and then with the entire commission. And the general consensus, I thought, was that we were looking for consistency in signage, primarily in all of these small strip centers that we have around town. You know, we have a wide range of signs that we pretty much all agreed is not what we were looking for. We're looking for consistency in design and size. And this regulation gives us that consistency in sign size
Right, and
in comparable sized.
right, and I understand that, but then, look at the flip side of it. Now, if those strip malls, all of a sudden, so they sold that strip mall to somebody, and somebody wanted to come in and redesign that and make it like the pictures they have in Milford and everything like that, we're restricting them to a certain size.
Right.
sign
Yeah,
That wouldn't accommodate for,
no, their design would accommodate what
well, I'm
size
saying,
sign was
well, I'm
allowed.
saying, like, say if it was like 10 stores and they just wanted to put 1, 2 stores in there, and then the amount of space, and like he was saying, they would have a smaller sign, you understand? So it wouldn't be like,
You can have
It wouldn't
quality
fit the building,
architecture
you know?
and detail without having a building pretending to look like a 2-story building when it's only a 1-story building.
no, I understand, but I mean, it does bring character to the town when it looks like, you know,
No,
maybe a 2-story
you missed
building
my
that
point.
it isn't,
You
but
missed
it does
my
bring a
point.
little bit more
You missed
character
my
to when
point.
you go down the road and look at it.
Hold on. You can have, and Paul, you can speak to this, you can have architectural character.
Actually, you
Paul
can't.
can. We're in deliberation.
Oh, sorry.
Falls off.
You can have architectural character, you can have details, you can have transitions, you can have pillars, you can have round ones,
I
square
know,
ones,
but
you can have railings.
Will the
you can
sign
have all that
fit
detail.
into that?
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
saying, well,
Why not?
that's where I'm at.
Go
I'm
to,
only one commissioner, so we can
Go-
move on
go
down
to-
the road.
go to villages,
Let's quit beating up Leon.
go
He's-
to villages,
Let's
go
let's
to.
get off of me.
He wanted to make his point, he made his point.
Right.
You made your point?
You made your point.
Well, as one of the chief culprits who spent a lot of time driving around town measuring signs and taking pictures, you know, I think everybody has brought up some great points when it comes to signs, and there is no one single perfect answer. But I think what we did here was, you know, on the smaller shopping centers, we went out and we said, you know, look, we're looking for uniformity of size. And on the smaller shopping centers, most of the signs that I measured were no more than 24 feet. And then we worried that we would make something too small, so when somebody goes into a crowded shopping center, that they couldn't find the store, and hence the 18. You know, and from there, formula. And again, I think when we looked at the 60 to 150, what we were talking about was some of the standalone, the pharmacies that were getting, the daycare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the number of standalones. You know, and at the end of the day, one of the specific discussions we did have was Big Y with signs that, can you work with Big Y based upon on the new regulation? So right now they've got a pair of 120s, you know, can you find it with a pair of 60s? Again, I don't think there's a perfect answer. Some of this I agree with 100%. Some of this I would have liked to have seen them a little bit bigger, but this is where we are. And the regulation that we have right now needs to be fixed because of what a sign can be.
But I thought that when we talked about Big Y,
Yep.
that we thought that the signs would stay the same size because.
Oh, we're not touching anybody who exists.
No. I'm saying that we use Big Y as an example.
Right.
That those signs would probably be.
So
like
if they built a
size.
Big Y across the street
Now
right now.
saying that what Kevin just said, he's saying that, no, they're gonna be
No, they would be,
half of
they would.
half of the size. So that makes it a big difference. I mean, if you compare to what they have now,
Or they
it
could
doesn't
put, or
look
they could
bad
put
with what they have.
one.
I understand
that
what I'm
size.
saying, but it doesn't look bad as what they have now on that
Oh,
building.
and again,
I'm saying if it was smaller, what would you think? it would look
Leon,
like? You think it would make any difference?
No.
Leon, the discussion about whether it looked bad or not, I think there was a lot of discussion about the appearance of the signs, you know, what looks good, what looks bad. And again, I didn't think there was consensus. It was, how do we come up with a regulation that does A, B, and C when you have buildings that come in all shapes and sizes? So
Right.
again, it's not a criticism of what is currently gonna go out on the market as looking bad. It's how do we write a regulation that creates the you know, one of the big things in this is that there is uniformity. And the lack of uniformity was allowed based on the biggest buildings, which get 40%, which is the scale discussion we had. So the bigger when you get into the big Y size, you know, you get 40%. You don't get a number, because we couldn't.
No, I know, but like, I never thought about with the Stop and Shop thing, because if you look at the Stop and Shop sign,
Right.
compared to where it sits in that area there, and we're gonna cut that, I don't know.
But they're not gonna build that building.
Okay.
They're gonna build the building differently, and they're going to design
No,
it.
but I'm just saying.
Does
but
that
I'm
big
saying-
sign make that building look better?
But it fits.
No, I didn't ask you if it
But I'm
fits.
saying
Yeah,
it
you're right.
fits.
It fits, because that's what was
I
allowed.
can get a lot of hats
I
that I put on my
understand
head,
that,
but
but
they don't make me look good.
But I'm just
To
saying,
Leon's point, though, the Stop and Shops, the big, massive anchor tenants, their signage is very important to them, and they're not really gonna be inclined to build the building and a smaller sign. I mean, in my experience, they're pretty firm on that. So, I mean, I
Do
could
you
see
think
a
if Stop and
situation.
Shop was told they could only have 120 square feet of signage on their building, that they would not have gone into that location?
I absolutely think they would have gone further down 25 and tried and gone to another town.
I don't agree at all, because as I gave the example, the Stop and Shop, which is a newer store in Newtown, has a sign a quarter the size of that.
I'm saying, it's been my experience that there have been companies that have decided to not go to a town because the town zoning regulations precluded them from having their branding in the way that they wanted it,
Well, that's
including
possible.
the size.
That's possible, but we also had experience of.
The Stop and Shop may be, but there's not as much wiggle room as we think on those big
But
tenants.
let's look at some of the examples in this town. We've had four, they're not all national brands, but they're certainly commercial brands that have gotten approved in this town in the last few years, and they all have gone with the sign regulations that you have.
Not
CVS, McDonald's,
I got that.
Goddard School, and Goodwill.
Right.
Those are not mom and pops, but
Right.
they all went with the
But we know
small
for a fact,
existing
we
sign
know for a
regulations.
fact that their signage is.
They chose to come here,
They
and they are.
reduced their signage to comply with our regs?
They're complying with our regs. And
Did
they're,
they reduce, did they come in
No, no.
smaller signage?
that's not the point.
It's absolutely
The point is, they came here, they got approval, and they're building.
They didn't ask us for 64 square foot
But
signs.
my point is if it didn't fit and they couldn't get it, then
But Jeremy, your question is, did they come in with a 64 square foot sign, see that our regulation allowed 32, and, right? That's your question?
no, it's not, all my point was that that there's a small concern that we could lose business if we're restricting these big companies from coming in and they can't get the size sign that they want.
Remember, on the.
That's my
on the-
point.
Remember,
I
on
know.
on the flip side, we've increased the size of the roadside sign. So
Right.
the freestanding signs for these businesses went from 32, period, have a nice day, to either 40 or 80.
Look,
So we did,
everybody's put a lot of work into it, and if we're as a group confident and comfortable with this, I'm fine with it. I think I've been pretty consistent, though, with the concern about us perhaps getting involved in affecting landlord-tenant negotiations and the business decisions with who gets how much signage, and so that's just my concern. But I'm cool with it if we're confident and comfortable with it as a group. That's right.
Dave?
I feel like a lot of the discussions that we've had to date have been driven by the bad actors in town. We've looked at all the horrible places, the things that we hate, the things that look bad, and we've tried to design regulations to prevent some of that. But when I look at, Kevin's picture of the Stop and Shop, it works. Now, whether it's a sign or the architecture, whatever, but it looks nice to me. It looks right. Now, this is qualitative. It's, it's taste. It works. And I'm feeling like we should be a little bit more flexible because I don't know if we will drive anyone away, but, you look at if we're gonna be building more strip malls, then the regulations that we have are gonna be good for trying to rein in some of those bad situations we have. But if we're gonna be going with other types of situations, I think we could be more flexible than we are, because I feel like we dedicate so much of our time to looking at the ones that we don't like, that we think are bad, as opposed to looking at it the other way. So I feel like there's room for flexibility.
I will say this, in driving around, looking at the signage around town, there is some truth to self-regulation. I mean, even with what we approved on Walmart, that sign on that expansive facade is not horrible. So there is some truth to the self-regulation of it. I think
I'm saying, the way I look at it is, the sign fits the design of the building, is the way I look at it. And like you're saying.
Again, the building was designed to fit the sign.
I got all that, but I'm saying that if somebody's gonna come in and they're gonna put in a big sign, they're gonna make that building fit for that sign, then it's going to look nice, because they don't want it to look like hell. They're not gonna put a big sign on there and the building's not gonna fit it. They're gonna make, like I'm saying, they're gonna design around it that's gonna make it fit that building, like they did at Stop and Shop, exactly what they did. If that thing was shorter and they put the big sign in there, it would look like hell. But what they did is they made it, you know,
Well, that's, the
What I'm
approach
saying-
though is if they just made that sign and that facade and the sign smaller, that might not look right, because it may be proportionally wrong. One of the examples that was shown
No,
was,
but I'm saying-
hold on, was Whole Foods in the example had, you know, two sides. They had two long signs on the end, and they had a little pudgy one at the top. That pudgy one didn't go well with the architecture because it wasn't designed well with the architecture. So you could take the existing Stop and Shop, and you could design the facade to look different to make the sign that you're allowed to have, if it's smaller, work with the architecture better. If you just plop it in the white space that we have in the store now, yeah, maybe that doesn't work because it's not designed together, because then the sign isn't complementary to the architecture. And the sign should be complementary to the architecture, not the architecture complementary to the sign.
well, I mean, yeah, but I'd rather have a building that looks like it's belongs there, maybe a little bit of massive, it may not be all this big building, but it looks nice, you understand? And you go down the road, and it looks nice, and you take a building, and you're gonna shorten that up to fit the sign, and then it looks like hell, that doesn't work
Well,
either.
again, you
So I mean,
didn't hear what I said.
there's two sides of the.
Okay, so
You didn't hear it.
do you, Jill, it's 10:30?
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
obligated to go running any rate? All right. So let's continue our deliberation to next meeting. And there's nothing else to deliberate on tonight, right? Nope. I don't think so either. All right. That takes care of 12 for tonight. Regulation review amendment work session next Thursday, 6:30. Will, you're going to get an agenda to us?
Yeah, I have a draft on my desk.
Okay. So next Thursday, 6:30. Item 14, correspondence other received. I have none. Anybody else? Commissioners, anybody have anything to report?
Nope.
Scott, Will, anything to report? Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, everybody.
Wait.